My name is Stephanie Miller, and I'm 28 years old. The text message from my mother appeared on my screen like a slap across the face. We no longer trust you, so we changed all the locks. I stared at my phone in disbelief, my hand trembling. The Miller family fortune, our respected financial firm, all potentially lost to me in an instant. After everything I'd discovered about my brother's activities, after trying to protect our legacy, this was how they treated me? I typed back a single line. "You'll regret this decision more than you know." As I pressed send, more messages flooded my screen. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever had family turn against you when you were just trying to do the right thing. And subscribe to follow my journey from family outcast to vindicated whistleblower. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. I was born into what looked like the perfect family from the outside. The Millers respected, wealthy, and influential in the financial world. My father James built Miller Financial Consulting from nothing into a powerhouse that managed billions in assets. My mother Catherine, always impeccably dressed and socially connected, ruled our family with a mixture of charm and manipulation that I didn't fully recognize until I was older. Then there were my brothers. Ryan, 32, had always been the golden child. Tall, handsome, charismatic, and groomed from an early age to take over the family business. My father saw himself in Ryan and gave him opportunities I had to fight for, despite my finance degree and natural aptitude for the business. My younger brother Dylan, 25, typically followed Ryan's lead. He was the family peacekeeper, sometimes caught between Ryan's ambitions and my determination to prove myself. I joined the family business 5 years ago, working twice as hard as Ryan to get half the recognition. But I loved our clients and took pride in protecting their investments. That's why when I noticed unusual patterns in some account transfers 3 months ago, I couldn't just ignore it. "Dad, I need to talk to you about these offshore transfers I found," I said, knocking on his office door one evening when we were working late. "Can it wait until tomorrow, Steph?" "I'm finishing up the quarterly reports," he replied, barely looking up. "It's important. There are some irregularities with the Westbrook account that—" Before I could finish, Ryan appeared in the doorway behind me. "Dad, you don't need to worry about that. I've already reviewed those transactions. It's part of the new investment strategy I told you about." I turned to face him. "What investment strategy involves moving $6 million through 3 different shell companies?" Ryan's face hardened, but he kept his voice pleasant. "Why don't we discuss this privately, sis? Dad's busy." Later that night, I was called into my father's study. Ryan was already there, along with my mother. Their faces were grim. "Stephanie," my father began, "Ryan tells me you've been questioning his management decisions and looking into accounts outside your portfolio." "I found concerning transactions," I said firmly. "We have a responsibility to our clients." "What you found," Ryan interrupted, "was a completely legitimate wealth protection strategy for our high net worth clients. Strategy that you misinterpreted because you weren't privy to the executive discussions." My mother sighed dramatically. "Honestly, Stephanie, this jealousy has to stop. Your brother works so hard, and you're always trying to undermine him." "Jealousy?" I was stunned. "This isn't about jealousy. This is about millions of dollars moving through questionable channels." My father looked tired. "Ryan has explained everything to my satisfaction. If you had concerns, you should have come to me first, not gone digging through accounts." "I did come to you first," I protested. Ryan interrupted before I could explain, but I could see they had already made up their minds. This was the first betrayal Ryan had gotten to them before me, twisted my legitimate concerns into petty rivalry. The family dinner 2 weeks later was tense. Ryan was smugly sharing his latest business triumph while my mother beamed. I pushed my food around my plate, still stinging from the accusations. "I've been reviewing the McAllister portfolio," Ryan announced, "and I think we can increase returns by at least 15% with my new strategy." I couldn't help myself. "The same strategy you're using for the Westbrook account?" The table went silent. My father put down his fork. "Stephanie, we've discussed this." "No, we haven't discussed anything. You've dismissed my concerns without even looking at the evidence." Ryan smirked. "What evidence?" Your conspiracy theories? The argument escalated until I left the table in frustration. That night, I made a decision. If my family wouldn't listen, I would gather irrefutable evidence. I stayed late at the office for the next week, meticulously documenting everything I found. The patterns were becoming clearer. Ryan was moving client funds through a complex web of transactions that seemed designed to obscure their ultimate destination. The night before I received that fateful text from my mother, I downloaded all the files I'd compiled, sensing that my access might not last much longer. My instincts were right by morning. My login to the company system had been revoked. And then came the message about the locks. The day after receiving my mother's text, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall. My phone had been buzzing with messages from extended family members, all variations of "How could you?" and "Your poor parents." The Miller family closing ranks, as they always did when threatened. A knock at my door roused me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Megan, my best friend since grade school, and one of the few people outside the family who understood the complexities of the Miller dynamics. "You look awful," she said bluntly when I opened the door. "Thanks," I said with a weak smile. "Come in. Coffee?" Megan followed me to the kitchen. "I've been trying to call you. What happened?" I showed her the text from my mother. "They changed the locks? Seriously?" Megan's eyebrows shot up. "What brought this on?" I sighed and pulled out my laptop. "Remember those irregularities I told you I found in the company accounts? It's worse than I thought. Ryan has been setting up offshore accounts, moving client money through them in ways that don't make sense for legitimate investments." I showed her some of the documents I'd compiled. "Look at this. The Westbrook family has $18 million invested with us. $6 million of that has been moved through these 3 shell companies in the past 4 months. The paperwork says it's for specialized market opportunities, but there's no record of what those opportunities are or any returns being recorded." "Have you confronted Ryan directly?" Megan asked. I let out a bitter laugh. I tried. 2 days ago, I found something even more damning. Ryan has accounts in the Cayman Islands that aren't connected to the firm on paper, but I tracked transfers from client funds ending up there. Holy shit, Steph, that's serious. I know. I tried to talk to my father privately again. I thought if I could just show him the documents without Ryan spinning the narrative first. I trailed off, remembering what happened next. I had asked Dylan to help me get time alone with our father. As the family peacemaker, he often managed to diffuse tensions, and he had seemed sympathetic when I shared some of my concerns. "I'll make sure Ryan is tied up in the Johnson meeting," Dylan had promised. "Dad will be in his office around 4. I'll text you when the coast is clear." I had waited anxiously for Dylan's message. "Documents ready." When my phone finally buzzed at 3:55, I hurried to my father's office. But when I opened the door, I froze. My father was there. But so were Ryan, my mother, and Dylan. "Come in, Stephanie," my father said formally. "Dylan tells us you have some accusations you'd like to make." Dylan couldn't meet my eyes. The second betrayal cut deeper than the first. My own brother had set me up. "This isn't how I wanted to do this," I said quietly. "And how did you want to do it?" Ryan asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Behind my back? Poisoning Dad against me with your distorted interpretations?" "They're not distortions," I insisted, opening my folder. "I have documentation." "Of what?" my mother interrupted. "Your brother implementing sophisticated investment strategies that you don't understand? Or are you suggesting something more sinister?" "I'm suggesting that client funds are being misappropriated," I said firmly. $18 million from the Westbrooks alone. The Westbrooks, Ryan cut in smoothly, who just thanked me last week for the excellent returns on their portfolio. "Those Westbrooks? Show us this evidence then," my father said. I laid out the documents, explaining the suspicious patterns I'd found. But Ryan had an answer for everything. Technical explanations that sounded plausible if you didn't look too closely at the timing and amounts. As I pressed my case, my mother's eyes filled with tears. "James," she said to my father, "I can't bear this. Your own daughter trying to destroy her brother's reputation out of jealousy." "It's not jealousy," I insisted. "Look at the numbers. They don't add up." But my father was comforting my mother, whose performance was Oscar-worthy. Dylan stared at the floor. That's enough, my father finally said. Stephanie, I've heard your concerns, and I've heard Ryan's explanations. I find his more convincing. More importantly, I find your approach to this situation deeply troubling. If you had legitimate concerns, there are proper channels. Going behind your brother's back, compiling secret files. That's not how we operate as a family or as a business. But Dad, no, this stops now. Ryan is the executive vice president of this firm. You will respect his position, or you will reconsider your place here. The meeting ended with my mother still dabbing at her eyes and Ryan looking vindicated. As I gathered my documents with shaking hands, my father delivered a speech about family loyalty that felt like twisting the knife. Security escorted me out of the building. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would set foot in Miller Financial as a family member. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my company email had been suspended. That evening, as Megan and I sat in my living room surrounded by the evidence no one would examine, we began to formulate a plan. You need more, Megan said bluntly. Something they can't explain away or dismiss. I know, I agreed. And I think I know where to get it. 3 days after being escorted from Miller Financial, I sat in a quiet cafe 6 blocks away, nervously checking my watch. The place was deliberately chosen far enough from the office to avoid running into colleagues, but not so far that my meeting would need to take a long lunch break to get there. David Anderson, the company's CFO and my longtime mentor, walked in exactly at noon. In his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, David had been with the firm since I was a teenager. He had always supported my career, even when my father and Ryan seemed determined to sideline me. Stephanie, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. His expression was grave. I only have 30 minutes. Your father has scheduled an executive meeting for 1 o'clock. Thank you for coming, I said. I wasn't sure you would. Your message concerned me. You said you had evidence of serious financial improprieties? I pulled out my laptop and opened the files I had compiled. It's Ryan. He's been moving client funds through a series of shell companies. Look at these transactions from the Westbrook account. David studied the screen, his frown deepening. I've been tracking similar patterns, he admitted. The Henderson portfolio, the Blackwell Foundation, significant sums being moved through unusual channels. My heart raced. Finally, validation from someone who understood the financial complexities involved. You've seen it too? He nodded. I've been trying to make sense of it for months. Ryan always has explanations, and your father accepts them. But, he shook his head. The numbers don't add up. I tried to tell my father, but they've closed ranks. My mother is convinced I'm just jealous of Ryan, and even Dylan. My voice caught. They've locked me out of everything, the office, the house, the family. David's expression softened. I'm sorry, Stephanie. That must be extremely painful. It is. But right now I'm more concerned about our clients. If Ryan is doing what I think he is, it's worse than you know, David interrupted, his voice dropping. I've found evidence that suggests he may be laundering money through our legitimate client accounts. I felt the blood drain from my face. Money laundering? That would explain the complex transaction patterns. Exactly. The problem is proving it without full access to all the accounts. Ryan has been gradually restricting who can see what in our systems, always with plausible explanations about information security and compliance. We spent the next 20 minutes comparing notes, with David filling in gaps in my understanding. He agreed to help me document everything properly, providing information I could no longer access directly. We need to be careful, he warned. If what we suspect is true, Ryan won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens him. I already know that, I said bitterly. My family thinks I'm the villain here. As David left, we agreed to meet again in 2 days. I felt hopeful for the first time since receiving my mother's text. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. That evening, I called my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who had always seemed more reasonable than the rest of the family. We had always been close, and she had often mediated family disputes in the past. I carefully explained the situation, emphasizing the evidence I had found and David's corroboration. This is very serious, Stephanie, she said. Have you considered that you might be misinterpreting things? Ryan has always been so responsible. That's what he wants everyone to believe, I said. But the evidence doesn't lie, Aunt Patricia. I wouldn't be risking my relationship with the family if I wasn't certain, she sighed. I'll talk to your mother, try to get her to listen. In the meantime, don't do anything rash. I felt relieved after our conversation. Having an ally within the family might help bring my parents around. The next morning, I discovered my third betrayal. My access to the family accounts had been restricted, not just the business accounts, but personal ones as well. The joint investment portfolio my grandfather had set up for all his grandchildren, the trust fund that would vest on my 30th birthday, even the checking account I'd had since college, that my father was still a co-signer on, all suddenly inaccessible. When I called the bank in confusion, the manager was apologetic but firm. The primary account holders have requested these changes. Miss Miller, there's nothing I can do. My phone rang almost immediately after I hung up with the bank. It was Megan. Have you seen this? She asked without preamble. Seen what? Check your email. I opened my personal email to find a message from a family friend, forwarding a lengthy email from my mother to her entire social circle. The message detailed how I had become unstable, consumed with jealousy toward my accomplished brother, and was making wild accusations that were tearing the family apart. She asked for their support and understanding during this difficult time and implied that I might approach them with my conspiracy theories. She's destroying my reputation, I whispered, scanning the dozens of names in the recipient list. Everyone we knew, family, friends, business associates, even my old college roommate whose parents were clients of the firm. It gets worse, Megan said. She's been calling people personally too. Lisa's mother said Catherine called her in tears about how concerned they are about your mental health. The smear campaign was in full swing. By evening, most of my social circle had received some version of my mother's message. My phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Stephanie. My brother Ryan's voice came through, cold and precise. This is your only warning. Drop whatever you think you're doing, or things will get much worse for you. Are you threatening me? I asked incredulously. I'm giving you good advice. You have no idea what you're messing with. Back off now, or you'll regret it. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone, shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. The walls were closing in. My family, my reputation, my financial security all under attack. That night, I lay awake wondering if I should give up. Was exposing Ryan worth losing everything? Maybe I could apologize, claim I had misunderstood, be welcomed back into the fold. My phone chimed with a text from David. Don't give up, truth matters. Those simple words renewed my determination. The next morning, as I walked to meet David, a car swerved onto the sidewalk just inches from where I stood, then sped away. It happened so fast I couldn't see the driver, but the message was clear. Someone wanted to scare me. Or worse. After the car incident, I moved to a new apartment building with security cameras and a doorman. I didn't tell anyone except Megan where I was living. Paranoid? Perhaps. But with Ryan's threat still ringing in my ears and the memory of that car bearing down on me, I wasn't taking chances. I contacted Jessica Lynn, a college friend who had become a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud cases. We met at her office where she reviewed the evidence David and I had compiled. This is compelling, Steph, Jessica said, adjusting her glasses as she scrolled through the documents. These transaction patterns are classic signs of money being moved to hide its origin or destination. But is it enough? I asked anxiously. My family dismissed everything as legitimate investment strategies I don't understand. Jessica's expression turned grim. That's the challenge with sophisticated financial crimes. They're designed to look legitimate to most observers. But there are red flags here that any experienced investigator would recognize. She pointed to several transactions. See these transfers? They're structured just under regulatory reporting thresholds. And these shell companies in the Cayman Islands have no apparent business purpose except to move money. Plus, the timing of these transfers correlates with large cash deposits into this other account Ryan controls personally. So you believe me, I said, relief washing over me. The evidence supports your concerns, Jessica confirmed. The question is, what do you want to do with it? That was the million-dollar question. Going to my family again seemed pointless. I needed outside authorities who couldn't be charmed or manipulated by Ryan or my mother. I think I need to talk to the SEC, I said finally. Jessica nodded. I have contacts there. I can help you prepare for a whistleblower meeting. But Stephanie, you need to be certain. This will burn bridges with your family that might never be rebuilt. Those bridges are already smoking, I replied bitterly. They changed the locks, remember? Over the next week, Jessica helped me organize the evidence into a comprehensive report. David continued to provide crucial information from inside the company, though he was increasingly nervous about being discovered. Ryan's been asking IT about login records, he told me during one of our calls. He suspects someone is gathering information. Despite the risks, we pressed forward. When Jessica finally secured a meeting with an SEC investigator named Marcus Powell, I felt both terrified and vindicated. This was becoming real. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, I received a text from Ryan. Heard you're talking to the SEC. Big mistake. Last chance to back off. I stared at my phone in shock. How could he possibly know about the meeting? Only Jessica, David, and I were aware of it. Had one of them leaked the information? I called Jessica in a panic. Ryan knows about the SEC meeting. How is that possible? I have no idea, she said, sounding as shocked as I felt. The only people at the SEC who know are Powell and his immediate supervisor. This meeting isn't even on the official calendar yet. That night, I received threatening messages from unknown numbers. Family traitors get what they deserve. Accidents happen to people who don't mind their business. Each one more ominous than the last. The pressure was mounting from all sides. 2 family friends I had known since childhood, Amanda and Robert Prescott, called to tell me they couldn't associate with me anymore. Your mother is heartbroken, Stephanie, Amanda said. Whatever issues you have with Ryan, destroying your family's reputation isn't the answer. After that call, I broke down. Sitting on the floor of my new, unfamiliar apartment, I sobbed until I couldn't breathe. The isolation, the threats, the loss of nearly everyone I cared about it was overwhelming. For a moment, I considered calling my mother, begging forgiveness, abandoning the whole thing. Megan found me like that when she came to check on me. Without a word, she sat beside me on the floor, put her arm around my shoulders, and let me cry. I don't know if I can do this, I finally whispered. You can, she said firmly. You're Stephanie fucking Miller. You graduated top of your class at Wharton. You've stood up to that egomaniac brother of yours your entire life. You are not going to let them win by breaking you. Her fierce loyalty gave me strength. What if I'm wrong? I asked. What if I'm destroying my family over nothing? Are you wrong? She challenged. Look at the evidence. Look at how they're behaving. Innocent people don't threaten and smear and cut off family members who ask questions. She was right, of course. And her pep talk gave me the resolve to keep going. That night, searching for a flash drive containing some old company files, I discovered an ancient backup drive from when I first joined the firm. On a whim, I connected it to my laptop. To my surprise, it contained archived emails and documents from 5 years ago, including correspondence between Ryan and several clients whose names had appeared in the suspicious transactions. One email exchange particularly caught my attention, Ryan discussing alternative investment structures with a client later convicted of securities fraud. The language was careful, but in light of what I now knew, the subtext was clear. Ryan had been involved in questionable practices for years, long before I noticed anything wrong. As I was processing this discovery, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered. Is this Stephanie Miller? Asked a gruff male voice. Who's asking? I replied cautiously. William Barnes. I was your father's business partner when they founded the firm. I think we need to talk. William Barnes had been a name from family lore, my father's original partner, who left the firm under mysterious circumstances when I was still a child. Family dinners occasionally included references to poor Bill who couldn't handle the pressure or didn't share your father's vision. I had never met him, though his name remained on some of the original company documents. We agreed to meet at his home in Greenwich, Connecticut, away from prying eyes in the city. His house was modest compared to my parents' mansion, but elegant and well-maintained. William himself was in his 70s, with a full head of white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "You look like your grandmother," he said as he welcomed me into his study. "She was a formidable woman, too." "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I said. "I'm curious why you reached out now." William settled into a leather chair and gestured for me to sit. "I still have friends at Miller Financial. Word gets around that James Miller's daughter is asking uncomfortable questions about the company's finances. Then suddenly, she's persona non grata, locked out of the family and the business." It reminded me of old patterns. "What do you mean?" His expression darkened. "Your father and I built that company on solid principles, transparency, client service, ethical investing. But as we grew, James became flexible in his interpretation of those principles, especially after Catherine came into the picture." "My mother?" I asked, surprised. William nodded. "Catherine has expensive tastes and grand ambitions. She pushed James to grow faster, take bigger risks, court wealthier clients regardless of where their money came from. And you objected," I guessed. "I did." Vehemently. "We had quite the shouting match about a particular client, a real estate developer with known mob connections. James wanted his business. I refused to touch it. A week later, discrepancies were discovered in accounts I oversaw. Discrepancies that mysteriously appeared in our audit. They framed you," I said. "The parallels to my situation unmistakable. They offered me a choice: resign quietly with a modest payout or face charges. I took the money and disappeared. I signed non-disclosure agreements, so I've kept my mouth shut all these years. But now you're talking to me." William smiled grimly. "Those NDAs expired last year. And I've watched from afar as Ryan has taken what his father started and made it exponentially worse. The rumors in financial circles about Miller Financial aren't good, Stephanie." For the next 2 hours, William shared insights into the company's history and the gradual corruption of its practices. He had maintained contacts in the industry who had kept him informed about Miller Financial's evolution. The picture he painted aligned perfectly with the evidence I had gathered about Ryan's current activities. "I want to help you expose the truth," William said finally. "Not for revenge, though. I won't pretend it doesn't taste sweet, but because clients are being defrauded. That was never what the firm was supposed to be." With William's guidance, we developed a strategy to approach key board members who might be receptive to our concerns, board members whose reputations would be devastated if they were implicated in a financial scandal. As we were finalizing our plan, my phone rang. It was David, and he sounded anxious. "Stephanie, I'm sorry, but I can't meet you tomorrow." "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately on alert. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine," he said, his voice unnaturally measured. "I've just been thinking, and maybe you're overreacting to normal business operations." Ryan explained some of the transactions to me, and they make sense in context. I felt sick. This wasn't the David I knew. "Who's with you right now?" I asked quietly. A pause. "No one." "Listen, I think it's best if we cool things for a while. Focus on moving forward professionally." After I hung up, I explained to William what had happened. "They got to him," William said grimly. "Threatened him or bribed him. Possibly both." The next day confirmed William's assessment. Through an industry contact, I learned that David had suddenly been promoted to executive vice president with a substantial salary increase and bonus structure. The position had been created specifically for him. 30 pieces of silver, William commented when I told him. "Your brother is nothing if not biblical in his betrayals." That evening, scrolling through social media, I saw pictures from a Miller family gathering at my parents' Hamptons estate. Everyone was their aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, everyone except me. My mother had posted photos with the caption, "So blessed to be surrounded by loving family. Some bonds can never be broken." The deliberate exclusion and public display felt like another twist of the knife. The next blow came when I discovered my apartment had been broken into while I was meeting with William. My laptop was gone, along with several files. Thankfully, I had backed up the most critical evidence on drives I kept in a safe deposit box. But the violation of my space left me shaken. The building security camera had captured the break-in. When I reviewed the footage with the building manager, I froze the frame on the intruder's face. "Dylan." My younger brother, using a key I didn't know he had, entering my apartment and leaving with my computer. "Do you want to file a police report, Miss Miller?" the manager asked. I stared at Dylan's image on the screen. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as he left with my laptop tucked under his arm. Another family member choosing Ryan's side over truth. "Yes," I said finally. "I want to file a report." The responding officers were sympathetic but not optimistic. "Family disputes over property can be complicated to prosecute," one officer explained, "especially when there might be questions about who owns what." Nevertheless, I insisted on making the report official. No more allowing my family to operate in the shadows. Everything would be on record from now on. As I signed the police report, my resolve hardened. The Miller family had made their choice, again and again. Now I would make mine, and they would face the consequences. With David's betrayal and my apartment break-in, it was clear I needed professional legal guidance. Jessica recommended Sarah Henderson, a former SEC enforcement attorney who now specialized in representing financial whistleblowers. Sarah's office in downtown Manhattan projected competence and discretion glass, steel, and muted colors. The attorney herself was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with short-cropped hair and a penetrating gaze. "Your case is compelling," Sarah said after reviewing our evidence. "The transaction patterns, the offshore accounts, the timing of funds moving in and out, it all suggests systematic fraud. The question is whether your brother is stealing from clients, laundering money for others, or both." "Both, I suspect," I replied. "Some clients seem to be victims, while others might be complicit." Sarah nodded. "That aligns with what I'm seeing. Here's how we proceed. We file a formal whistleblower complaint with the SEC, providing all documentation. Simultaneously, we prepare for the inevitable blowback from your family. They've already locked me out and smeared my name," I pointed out. "What more can they do?" Sarah's expression turned grave. "Much more. When people with wealth and power feel cornered, they can become dangerous. We need to protect you legally and physically." She outlined a comprehensive strategy, including security measures and preparations for potential countersuits from my family. It was sobering but necessary. While Sarah handled the legal aspects, William was working on another front. His journalist friend at the Financial Times was interested in our story, though he couldn't publish anything substantial until the SEC investigation was underway. "Even a hint in the press will make your brother nervous," William explained. "Nervous people make mistakes." Within a week, Sarah had prepared our SEC filing. The formal complaint detailed years of suspicious transactions, with Ryan at the center of a complex web of financial misdealings. When I signed the final document, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I had done what was right. The SEC moved faster than I expected. Within days, they had begun a preliminary investigation, requesting documents from Miller Financial. Though not public yet, such requests sent ripples through the company. My first indication that the pressure was working came from Claire Jackson, my father's longtime secretary who had always been kind to me. She called from a number I didn't recognize. "Stephanie, it's Claire. I'm calling from my personal phone on my lunch break." "Claire? Is everything okay?" "There's panic at the office. SEC document requests came in yesterday, and Ryan has been locked in your father's office with the company attorneys since this morning. I've been asked to pull records going back 5 years, and Ryan's assistant Jessica is working overtime shredding documents. They're destroying evidence?" I was horrified but not surprised. "I think so," Claire confirmed. "And that's not all. Ryan tried to access the secure file server to alter some records, but IT had to inform him that any changes would be logged in the system audit trail. He was furious. This information was gold for our case." I thanked Claire for the risk she was taking and immediately relayed everything to Sarah. "This is exactly what we need," Sarah said. "Attempting to destroy evidence demonstrates consciousness of guilt. I'll inform the SEC immediately they may seek an emergency preservation order." Meanwhile, William had been quietly reaching out to board members he still had relationships with. He sent anonymous tips about the SEC investigation, carefully worded to provoke concern without revealing our involvement. The strategy worked, An emergency board meeting was called, ostensibly to discuss regulatory compliance procedures. My father, as chairman, would be required to address the SEC inquiry, putting him in the uncomfortable position of either revealing the full scope of the investigation or misleading the board. As pressure mounted at Miller Financial, my mother's tone suddenly changed. After weeks of silence or hostile messages, she began calling daily with increasingly conciliatory overtures. "Stephanie, darling, this family conflict has gone on too long. Your father misses you. I miss you. Can't we sit down and talk like adults?" I didn't respond to these calls, but I saved every voicemail. The abrupt shift in strategy told me they were worried. Claire continued to provide updates from inside. "Your father called a meeting of all department heads today. He looked terrible, like he hasn't slept in days. He announced a comprehensive compliance review but wouldn't take questions." The final confirmation that our strategy was working came when a small but significant article appeared in the Financial Times business section, SEC examining practices at Miller Financial Consulting. The piece mentioned no specifics, just that regulators were reviewing certain transactions as part of an industry-wide examination of investment practices. Vague as it was, the article had immediate impact. Miller Financial's stock, which traded publicly though the family maintained controlling interest, dropped 11% in a single day. Several large institutional clients called requesting meetings with senior management. The pressure was building. That evening, my father finally called directly. "Stephanie," he said, his voice sounding older than I remembered. "We need to talk." "Dad," I responded, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's been weeks since you or Mom would take my calls. What changed?" "This situation has gotten out of hand," he said carefully. "There are misunderstandings that need to be cleared up." "Misunderstandings?" I repeated. "Like Ryan's offshore accounts? Or the client funds being moved through shell companies? Those kinds of misunderstandings?" A long pause. "These are complex matters that shouldn't be discussed over the phone. I want to meet in person. Just you and me." I consulted with Sarah before agreeing to anything. "This could be an opportunity," she advised, "but it could also be a trap. If you go, we prepare thoroughly, and you don't go alone." We arranged to meet my father at a neutral location, a private room at the Harvard Club where he was a member. Sarah would accompany me as my attorney, non-negotiable. My father looked shocked when I arrived with legal counsel, but he recovered quickly. "I had hoped we could keep this within the family," he said stiffly. "You stopped treating me like family when you changed the locks," I replied. "What did you want to discuss?" He sighed heavily. "Stephanie, I know you believe you've found evidence of wrongdoing, but there are explanations for everything you've seen. Ryan has been implementing sophisticated strategies that involve laundering money through client accounts," I interrupted. "That involve offshore entities with no legitimate business purpose? Please don't insult my intelligence, Dad. I have an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of experience in the business. I know what I'm looking at." My father's face hardened. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve? Do you understand what these allegations will do to the company your grandfather founded, that your family depends on?" "I'm trying to prevent a catastrophe," I said. "The SEC is already investigating. If the family gets ahead of this, cooperates fully, and makes clients whole, there's a chance to salvage something. If you continue covering for Ryan, you'll lose everything." "So this is an ultimatum?" he asked coldly. "No, Dad. It's reality." The meeting ended with nothing resolved, but I had confirmed something important. My father knew, or at least suspected, that Ryan's activities wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. His concern was damage control, not denying wrongdoing. That night, Ryan made his most desperate move yet. I received a call from the SEC investigator, Marcus Powell. "Miss Miller, something concerning has come to our attention. We've received documentation suggesting that you were the architect of the questionable transactions at Miller Financial, and that you're attempting to deflect blame after being discovered." My blood ran cold. "That's absurd." "What documentation?" "Emails, transaction records, meeting notes, all pointing to your involvement. They appear to have your digital signature. Ryan was framing me for his own crimes using documents stolen from my laptop. likely altered to implicate me instead of him. It was clever. As a family member with access, I could theoretically have executed the transactions I was reporting. Fortunately, Sarah and I had anticipated this possibility. Mr. Powell, we can prove those documents are fraudulent. We have the original versions secured with blockchain timestamps and digital signatures that can be verified. Additionally, we have evidence that Miss Miller's apartment was recently broken into and her computer stolen. We filed a police report. The next day, the SEC announced a formal investigation into Miller Financial Consulting. The company's stock plummeted another 22%. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines questioning the firm's stability and practices. Catherine's public breakdown came at the annual charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, an event the Miller family had co-chaired for decades. When a society reporter asked an innocent question about the family business challenges, my mother lost her carefully maintained composure. "My daughter is trying to destroy us," she cried, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "After everything we've done for her, the opportunities we've given her, she repays us with lies and betrayal." The outburst was reported in the society pages, adding a scandalous dimension to what had previously been a dry financial story. Suddenly, the human drama of the Miller family was public fodder. Throughout this period, I maintained strategic silence with the media. On Sarah's advice, "Let the evidence speak for itself," she counseled. "Your family is doing enough damage with their public statements." As client withdrawals accelerated and the stock continued to fall, Ryan became increasingly desperate. One evening, my buzzer rang unexpectedly. Through the intercom, I heard Dylan's voice. "Steph, please. I need to talk to you. I'm alone." Against my better judgment, but with building security on alert, I let him up. My younger brother looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. His normally impeccable clothing rumpled. "I'm sorry," were his first words. "I never should have set you up with Dad and Ryan. I never should have taken your laptop." I was scared. "Scared of what, Dylan?" I asked. Not ready to forgive, but willing to listen. "Of Ryan," he admitted. "He has dirt on everyone, Steph. Things he's discovered, things he's invented, he keeps files. When you started asking questions, he showed me what he had on me. Old drug tests from college, doctored photos with escorts. He said he'd make sure Mom and Dad saw everything, that I'd lose my trust fund, my position in the company. It was exactly how Ryan operated: leverage, manipulation, fear. So you chose to betray me instead." Dylan hung his head. "I was weak. But now everything's falling apart anyway. Ryan's behavior is getting erratic. He's drinking during the day, yelling at everyone. Dad looks like he's aged 10 years in a month." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "I want to make it right. I want to help you." I wanted to believe him. But after so many betrayals, trust didn't come easily. "What exactly are you offering, Dylan?" "Information," he said. "I know where Ryan keeps his real records, the ones that aren't on the company servers. And I know about meetings he's had with certain clients that weren't on any official calendar." It seemed too convenient, this sudden desire to help. "Why should I believe you're not setting me up again?" Dylan reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "Because I brought proof. This has everything: Ryan's private calendar, recordings of conversations, his real accounting. I made a copy when he was out of the office. I took the drive but didn't plug it in. I'll have it examined first. If you're setting me up again—" "I'm not," he insisted. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm telling the truth now." After Dylan left, I called Sarah and explained what had happened. "Don't connect that drive to any of your devices," she warned. "It could contain malware designed to compromise your evidence. We'll have our tech team examine it first." My instinct to be cautious proved correct. When Sarah's cybersecurity experts analyzed the drive, they found it contained legitimate files that would indeed damage Ryan, but also hidden malware that would have given him access to any computer it was connected to. "A classic double-cross," Sarah said when she called with the results. "The information is genuine enough to seem like Dylan was helping you, but the real purpose was to infect your systems. We can use the files, but your brother is still working for Ryan." I felt a fresh wave of disappointment but also vindication. My family was showing their true colors at every turn. and each betrayal only strengthened our case. As formal charges against Ryan were being prepared, I received a meeting request from the full Miller Financial Board of Directors. The tide was turning, and now they wanted to hear my side directly. 3 months after my mother's text about changing the locks, I stood outside the Miller family home in Westchester County. The Georgian mansion had been my childhood home, a place filled with complicated memories, some warm, many stifling. Now I was returning not as a daughter, but as an adversary. The formal email from my father had requested my presence for an emergency family meeting to address recent developments. My attorney had advised against attending without her, but I insisted on bringing William Barnes instead. His historical knowledge of the company and first-hand experience with my father's tactics would be invaluable. Ready? William asked as our car stopped at the imposing front gates. As I'll ever be, I replied, straightening my shoulders. The housekeeper who opened the door, not the one I'd grown up with, but someone new, led us silently to my father's study. The room fell quiet as we entered. My father sat behind his massive desk, my mother perched tensely beside him. Ryan stood by the fireplace, trying to project confidence but betrayed by the nervous tapping of his fingers against his leg. Dylan sat apart from the others, not meeting my eyes. Stephanie, my father began formally, then his gaze shifted to William. Bill, this is unexpected. William is here as my advisor, I said calmly. Given our history, I didn't think it wise to come alone. My mother's face tightened with barely controlled anger. Of all people, you bring him? The man who tried to ruin your father's reputation 20 years ago? William smiled thinly. Is that the story James told you, Catherine? How fascinating. We're not here to revisit ancient history, my father interjected. Stephanie, this situation has spiraled out of control. The SEC investigation, the press coverage, the client withdrawals, it has to stop before irreparable damage is done to this family and this company. The damage was done long before I went to the SEC, I replied. It was done when Ryan started using client accounts for his own purposes. It was done when you ignored my concerns because they were inconvenient. It was done when you locked me out instead of looking at the evidence. Ryan stepped forward. These wild accusations aren't wild at all, I interrupted. And they aren't just accusations anymore. The SEC has enough evidence to bring formal charges, Ryan. Against you primarily, but potentially against Dad as well, for failure of oversight. What do you want? My father asked, his voice strained. Why are you here? Because you invited me, I said simply. I assumed you were finally ready to face reality. My mother stood suddenly, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. How can you do this to us? To your own family? After everything we've given you, all the advantages, the education, the position in the company, this is how you repay us? With betrayal? Her performance was as practiced as ever, but this time I wasn't swayed. Mom, save the theatrics. This isn't about betrayal, it's about right and wrong. It's about clients who trusted us with their life savings while Ryan used their accounts for his schemes. You don't understand the pressures of running a company like this, my father began. Actually, James, William interjected. She understands perfectly. Your daughter has demonstrated more integrity and courage than you did when we were partners, and certainly more than you've shown since. She's trying to save what can be saved of the Miller legacy. My father's face reddened. You have no right. I have every right, William shot back. I helped build this company on principles you've systematically betrayed. If you had listened to Stephanie months ago, there might have been a way to contain this, to make clients whole quietly. Instead, you chose to protect the wrong child. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes. What exactly is the evidence against Ryan? He asked finally. I exchanged glances with William. This was the opening we had hoped for. I think it's time you reviewed it yourself, I said, placing a file folder on his desk. These are copies of transactions showing client funds being diverted through shell companies Ryan controls. These are emails between Ryan and certain clients whose funds were used to launder money. And these, I placed a final set of documents down, are records from the private server Ryan maintained outside the company system, detailing the actual flow of funds. My father opened the folder with trembling hands. As he began to read, his face grew increasingly pale. Ryan surged forward. "Those are forgeries. She's making this all up to take control of the company. She's always been jealous of my position." "Stop, Ryan," my father said quietly. Still reading. "These records have verification codes that match our internal system. And this email, this is from the Dimitrov account. I specifically asked you about these transfers last year, and you told me they were legitimate private equity investments." Ryan's confident facade cracked. "Dad, you don't understand the pressures the client demands. Sometimes you have to be creative to meet return expectations." "Creative?" my father repeated, his voice rising. "You call this creative? This is fraud, Ryan. This could send you to prison." As my father continued reading, the full extent of Ryan's activities became clear. His expression shifted from disbelief to horror to a cold anger I had rarely seen. "How long?" he asked Ryan. "How long have you been doing this?" Ryan didn't answer, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. 7 years, I said. "Based on the records we've compiled, it started small, a few questionable transactions, some aggressive accounting, but it grew, especially in the last 3 years." My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly turned on me. "This is your fault. If you hadn't gone digging, none of this would have come to light. We could have continued as a family." "Catherine," my father said sharply. "Not now." "Yes, now," she insisted. "She's destroying everything we've built, everything we've worked for." "Ryan did that," William pointed out calmly. "Stephanie is just exposing it." As my parents argued and Ryan stared silently at the floor, Dylan finally spoke up. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "That depends on what you all decide to do next," I replied. "The SEC investigation is proceeding. Ryan will almost certainly face charges. The question is whether the rest of the family and the company will be implicated as well." My father looked aged beyond his years as he closed the folder. "What are our options?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the study window, I saw 2 black SUVs in the driveway. The housekeeper appeared at the door, her expression anxious. "Mr. Miller, there are federal agents here with a warrant." Ryan made a sudden dash for the side door that led to the garden, but one of the agents was already coming around the house. Within moments, the study was filled with FBI agents and SEC officials. "Ryan Miller?" asked the lead agent. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." As they recited his rights and placed him in handcuffs, Ryan's mask finally shattered completely. "Dad, do something. Call our attorneys." My father stood frozen, the documents still in his hand, as his golden child was led away. In the chaos that followed, I slipped out quietly with William. Our work was done. The truth was finally out, though the cost had been devastating. "You did the right thing," William said as we drove away from the house. "It doesn't feel like it now, but you did." I watched my childhood home recede in the rear window, wondering if I would ever return. "I know," I said. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." The months following Ryan's arrest were a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and corporate damage control. The story of Miller Financial became a cautionary tale in business schools. How a respected family firm had been corrupted from within, and how that corruption had ultimately been exposed by the founder's granddaughter. Ryan eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for multiple financial crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming once investigators gained full access to company records. My father was spared criminal charges but faced civil penalties for failure of oversight. The SEC determined that while he had been negligent, he had not been knowingly complicit in Ryan's schemes. The distinction saved him from prison, but not from public disgrace. My mother struggled to accept the new reality. In her mind, I remained the villain who had destroyed our family, not Ryan who had committed the crimes. She refused to speak to me for months, even as my father began tentative efforts at reconciliation. "She'll come around eventually," my father said during one of our first one-on-one meetings after everything had settled. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a Manhattan restaurant, Both a little uncomfortable but trying. I'm not sure she will, Dad, I replied honestly. Mom has always been more committed to appearances than reality. He sighed heavily. I owe you an apology, Stephanie. Many apologies, actually. I should have listened to you from the beginning. Why didn't you? I asked. The question that had haunted me for months. He was quiet for a long moment. Pride, I suppose. And blindness. Ryan was so much like me, or how I wanted to see myself. Confident, charismatic, bold. It was easier to believe he was right than to consider the alternative. That he was using those qualities to commit fraud? Yes. My father looked older than his 62 years. The events of the past year etched into the lines of his face. I failed as a father to both of you. I let Ryan become something I never intended. And I pushed you aside when you were trying to do the right thing. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere. And it was a start. The company itself underwent a complete restructuring. With Ryan gone and my father stepping down as CEO, the board approached me about taking a leadership role in the reorganized firm. After much consideration, I accepted a position as Chief Compliance Officer with a seat on the board. My conditions were non-negotiable: complete transparency, strict ethical guidelines, and independent oversight. We need to rebuild trust, I told the board. With our clients, with regulators, with the public. That can only happen with radical honesty about what went wrong and genuine accountability moving forward. It was a challenging role, made more difficult by lingering resentment from some longtime employees who blamed me for the company's troubles. But gradually, as we implemented new systems and demonstrated our commitment to change, the atmosphere improved. Dylan's path to redemption was more complex. After Ryan's arrest, he fell into a depression, overwhelmed by guilt over his role in the family drama. He had betrayed me, but had also been manipulated and threatened by Ryan. I found it difficult to fully trust him again, but I couldn't bring myself to shut him out completely. I'm sorry, he said during one particularly emotional conversation. I know those words aren't enough, but I am. I was weak and scared, and I let Ryan use that against me. Why didn't you come to me? I asked. Before things went so far? I didn't think you could protect me from him, Dylan admitted. And I didn't want to choose sides. I just wanted our family to stay together, even when I knew things weren't right. It was a painful truth, but an honest one. Over time, Dylan committed himself to making amends not just with words, but with actions. He enrolled in therapy, volunteered with financial literacy programs, and eventually found his own path outside the family business. Our family began the slow, difficult process of healing. My father insisted on family therapy sessions, which my mother reluctantly attended. The initial sessions were tense and unproductive, with my mother maintaining that I had acted out of jealousy rather than principle. Catherine, our therapist, said gently after one particularly bitter exchange, "Your son committed serious crimes that hurt many people. Your daughter exposed those crimes. Why is your anger directed at her rather than him?" "Because she destroyed our family," my mother insisted. "Ryan destroyed the family," I countered. I just refused to help cover it up. Slowly, painfully, we began to unpack decades of family dysfunction, my mother's obsession with status and appearances, my father's favoritism, Ryan's sense of entitlement, my need to prove myself, Dylan's desire to please everyone. None of it excused what had happened, but understanding the patterns helped us begin to break them. 6 months after Ryan began his prison sentence, I received a letter from him. I almost threw it away, unopened, but decided I needed to hear what he had to say. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now what you were trying to do. You were protecting the company and our clients in a way that I should have but didn't. I lost sight of everything except my own ambition. Whether his remorse was genuine or another manipulation, I couldn't tell. But it didn't really matter. My journey wasn't about Ryan anymore. It was about rebuilding what could be salvaged and learning to trust my own judgment. A year after my mother's text about changing the locks, we held a small family dinner at my father's house. It wasn't perfect, my mother was civil but distant, and Ryan's absence was a palpable void. But it was a step toward a new kind of family relationship, one based on honesty rather than appearances. As I left that night, my father handed me something small and metal that caught the light. "What's this?" I asked, looking down at a key in my palm. "To the house," he said simply. "The new locks. You should have one." It was a symbolic gesture, but a meaningful one. Trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt slowly, one small act at a time. In the quiet moments when I reflected on everything that had happened, I often thought about that one-line reply I'd sent to my mother's text: "You'll regret this decision more than you know." At the time, it had felt like a threat or a prediction. Now I understood it had been a simple truth. The locks they'd changed to keep me out had ended up locking them into a path that led to Ryan's downfall and the family's painful but necessary reckoning. Family trust isn't guaranteed by blood. It's earned through honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family isn't to protect them from consequences, but to make sure they face them before it's too late. What's your experience with family trust? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most necessary healing.